Chapter 43. Centenarian Jenny. Mid-1930s. Hot as the 4th of July. H. Extreme heat. Granny said it was as hot as the 4th of July that day. On October 23, 1934, Aunt Jenny, as she was known in the Bear Creek community, celebrated her 100th birthday. Her birthday was attended by neighbors who brought food and wished her with congratulations and affections. 3 preachers attended and spoke with her and those present. Jenny had joined the Missionary Baptist Church in the 1880s, which means she would have been baptized probably by a minister of that faith, but no church existed then on Bear Creek. Circuit preachers came through the area, and she would have attended a service in a home or perhaps at a brush arbor meeting, as no school building had been built yet for a church meeting. The landmark Baptists were fairly numerous in Arkansas, Tennessee, and Texas, and had split from Southern Baptists before the Civil War over allowing non-baptized ministers to preach in Baptist churches. These rejected preachers were not completely immersed in baptismal waters, or they had been immersed, but by some denomination other than Baptist. I imagine Jenny heard a preacher who told her she had to be a landmark missionary Baptist to be in the bride of Christ. Her decision to become one of them would influence future generations of her family. Jenny attended her last church service just before the time that a landmark missionary Baptist church was organized by her grandson Riley Harness at the Cooper Schoolhouse. Her hearing and sight were poor, and she was unable to walk. She was confined to a wheelchair that the family had gotten for her. Her mind was still good, and she liked to drink a little coffee and use some tobacco in moderation, both of which were being censured by some groups like the Adventists and Mormons. She thought it was important to eat good food in the proper amount and to eat a light evening meal. Being the only centenarian in the county, folks asked her how she had made it so long, and she told them those things. The following year, Riley and Melinda, with their children, returned to Bear Creek from Oklahoma in the fall, but they left their oldest son Earl in Oklahoma to finish up his schooling. The next year, the drought returned across the Midwest in 1936, and in June, a major heat wave started with record-high temperatures reported in many locations. Places as far north as Mio, Michigan, hit 113 degrees. The oppressive heat, once again, with the wind, caused the dust to blow and darken the skies as it moved across the plains. One farmer quipped that the dust was so thick that he saw a prairie dog burrowing down through the top of a cloud. During his stay near Cordell, Oklahoma, Earl was walking to school one day when he spotted a skunk. The skunk had lots of white on his back, making his pelt more valuable. Looking for a rock or a club to take this prize, he found none. Unlike the hills of Arkansas, western Oklahoma had few trees and fewer rocks. Unwilling to let this trophy worth $2 get away, Earl decided to use his foot and stomp the skunk. His aggressiveness paid off as he immobilized the critter, and then he hid it with plans to recover it after school that day. On to school, the proud hunter went unaware that he had picked up a scent with his encounter. When he arrived and entered the classroom, his presence was immediately known. Earl smelled with skunk, and the teacher ordered him to leave. He had never missed a day of school and was so disappointed with the outcome. On his way back to where he was staying with the Robert Bond family, he stopped at a relative's house. Velsie Watts, A cousin who was 18 years old told Earl to take off his clothes and get into bed while she tried to wash the smell from them. He later told that his clothes didn't give up their fragrance after she washed and dried them in the sun. Sadly, Earl had to miss a total of 2 days of school for his $2 skunk. Riley returned once again to Oklahoma in the spring of 1936 to try being a sharecropper. His dispute with his father Billy about which part of the Bear Creek farm he could farm for himself had reached a point of impasse. Tenant farming, or as some called it, white sharecropping, was when you farmed someone's land and then agreed to repay them at harvest for its use. Normally, the arrangement was 1 to the owner and 2 to the sharecropper. How Riley was able to farm the land is unknown to me. Someone had to loan him a horse and equipment, or he had to hire the plowing by others. He might have teamed up with someone as a sharecropper who had the equipment needed. The harness boys were old enough then to do hard work and help in the field. With Earl being the oldest at 16, Clifford at 14, Troy at 13, Perry at 11, and daughter Veda at 8, the children had been trained to help their family work and survive. Times were hard, and each had to help and contribute to the welfare of all. Roy at 6, Reva at 4, and James at 2 contributed little then, but when they got older, they too had many opportunities to help Riley farm. All the children in time worked the dirt from sunup to sundown. It was a generation of young folks who learned to work hard and support their family. On wash day, Melinda told Earl to go out and fetch her some water. Earl was feeling old enough to not be told to do chores, so he said, "Fetch your own water." Upon hearing his scorn, she grabbed a switch and came after him. Earl ran out into the yard with his mother in hot pursuit, so he jumped the back fence and ran out into the field. Melinda crawled through the fence and continued her chase. Earl circled around and back to the house and was on the front porch when his breathless mother approached. She was too hot and tired to deal with him, so she tied him to the post of the porch. After Melinda caught her breath, she took Riley's leather shaving strap and commenced to give Earl a thrashing. After several strokes, Clee asked for her to give Earl some relief. She continued, and Clee said, "Mom, you're going to kill him. Give me some of that." So Melinda turned and let Earl's sympathetic brother have a few licks before she cooled down. She was a petite mother who needed to teach her strapping boys the importance of respect and not to roust the wrath of their elders. Earl, being the oldest, was put in charge by Riley of keeping the siblings in line and doing their part of the chores. Clifford was big and strong, but lazy. He would try to find creative ways to avoid work. On one occasion, he was planting seed, and rather than walking to the end of the field to get more seed, he decided he would stretch his seeds to make them last longer. This meant that the proper spacing of the plants would create skips when the day of reckoning came. Earl keeping his brothers in line was preliminary training for him when America would go to war, and Army recruits needed to be trained for battle. He was a natural leader and became a drill sergeant for Uncle Sam. With Riley's family in Oklahoma, they attended a missionary Baptist church near Carnegie. At an altar call at the conclusion of an evening service, Earl went up to the minister and asked for guidance about his soul. He was told to pray through, an expression for the penitent to pray until something happened. Later in life, Earl said that he had no sense of forgiveness until someone read him scriptures about the way of salvation. On August 16, 1936, he was water baptized in the Washita River. making him a member of the New Harmony Missionary Baptist Church. Etta Melinda was also saved at a service along with her son Clifford, and both were baptized into the Baptist Church. The Harness boys missed the clear waters of Bear Creek and the abundance of rocks to throw. When they were traveling to Oklahoma, they loaded up their pockets with stones to throw at things as they traveled down the road. Perry said that Troy with his left hand could throw a rock so hard that it would make a whizzing sound in flight. Perry said that when Bartley Williams, right-handed, teamed up with Troy Harness, left-handed, a squirrel up a tree didn't have a chance of escaping, but in the rockless western Oklahoma, good throwing rocks were hard to come by. Rocks were scarce in 1936, but not grasshoppers. The Harness boys were amazed to see them in droves like never before. Perry Harness recalls seeing them completely cover a fence post. The heat that summer hit an all-time high in many locations, and some records still stand as the hottest day ever recorded. If someone had promoted the idea of GW, global warming, in the Dust Bowl era, they might have had many adherents. The expression, "as hot as hell," seemed fitting for the decade. The dry ground acted like a desert, and the heat drove the temperatures up. While in Oklahoma, Billy Harness wrote his son and asked him to come home with the promise that he would give Riley the farm. So, after harvesting crops and getting a small return for their exhausting efforts, Riley took the family back to the Bear Creek farm. Billy needed help holding things together as his age had left him feeble. With a farm to care for and an elderly mother as well as a special needs daughter, it was time for Billy to retire and get help. Riley took the reins from his father and steered the Harness family forward. Jane Virginia, Jenny Renfro Harness, at 102 years old in 1936, was very feeble. She always wore a bonnet and sat in a wheelchair so she could be moved about. She had lived most of her life on Bear Creek in the lower house, where Perry Harness was born. Her granddaughter, Nora Bell Harness, helped with taking care of her. Nora was 47 years of age in 1936, but then they both were being cared for by Riley and Melinda. With no outside home care or rest homes available, the children of Jenny lovingly tended to her needs. Her earthly life ended on December 2nd as she passed from this life into the next. The hen that had scratched to ensure the life of her two boys finally rested, her soul in heaven and her body prepared for a grave next to her beloved husband, Ellich. Her beloved had been dead for 76 years. How sweet for someone who had endured so much hardship to now rest in peace and in the presence of her God. She had endured some of the hardest times in America's history. Reflection. The old hen who had raised her chicks plus more was missing most her feathers as her head drooped and her eyes closed with one last breath. Her Savior, who had likened himself to a hen, would now gather her under wing and give her needed rest and comfort. From her and Ellis came 112 descendants at the time of her death. Jenny and those of like faith welcomed the words of John the Apostle when he was told to write these words, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them. Revelation 14:13.